Welcome back to our channel. Your dime could be worth $500,000. A 1975 proof Roosevelt dime missing the S mint mark sold for $506,250. One of only two known. Think your spare change is just 10 cents? Like and subscribe to uncover hidden dime treasures. The year was 1975, and the United States Mint in Philadelphia was operating at full pace, fulfilling its critical role in keeping the nation's coinage circulating smoothly. Demand for the Roosevelt dime, in particular, remained strong. Millions of the 10-cent pieces were being struck daily to meet commerce's needs. On the production floor, the steel dies pressed into service wore down quickly under the relentless force of the presses, and the engraving department worked constantly to prepare fresh dies, ensuring that each coin rolling off the line carried the proper year, design, and mint mark. Yet amidst this orderly rhythm of minting, one curious and unnoticed detail slipped into the machinery of history, a detail that would take decades to fully reveal itself. To the mint's workers, those 1975 dimes appeared unremarkable. They bore the familiar portrait of Franklin D. Roosevelt on the obverse, facing left, with Liberty inscribed along the rim and the date 1975 positioned just below his neck. The reverse displayed the torch, olive branch, and oak branch, symbolic of liberty, peace, and strength. And as the dies came together, each struck blank metal planchets with precision, producing thousands of coins per hour, which fell into bins with a clatter. The presses operated day and night, their noise a steady heartbeat in the cavernous minting facility. But within one of those bins lay a handful of dimes that would quietly defy expectations, subtle at first glance, yet completely at odds with what a dime was supposed to be. Decades later, a dedicated collector named Raymond Howell would be sorting through a bag of old change in the quiet comfort of his study, unaware of the significance of what he was about to uncover. He had always been fascinated by U.S. coins, often losing himself for hours in rolls of nickels, pennies, and dimes, hunting for doubled dies or misplaced mint marks. That evening was no different, except for one dime that immediately seemed off. As his eyes swept over the 1975 dime in his hand, the date looked fine, Roosevelt's portrait was as expected, and the reverse carried all its expected detail. But something nagged at him. He squinted, adjusted the lamp at his desk, and turned the dime in his fingers. The surface shimmered under the light, and then he noticed it, the absence of a mint mark. His breath caught. A 1975 dime with no mint mark? He checked again, certain he'd missed it. On coins struck in Philadelphia that year, the practice was still to leave the area blank where a mint mark would normally appear, but something about this coin seemed wrong. The die marks on the surface suggested more than just a missing mint mark. Something in the relief of the lettering and numbers felt unusual to his trained eye. He placed it beside several other 1975 dimes for comparison. The differences, though subtle, began to stand out more sharply. The thickness of the numbers, the slightly misaligned torch on the reverse, the faint doubling on the motto "I in God We Trust." Raymond's heart pounded as he rummaged through his reference books and magnifier, cross-referencing known varieties. This was no ordinary strike, nor was it simply a Philadelphia no-mint-mark dime. His hands trembled as he carefully flipped the coin over again, staring at the odd texture of the fields and the peculiarity of the device's alignment. His thoughts raced. Could this be one of the rare transitional error dimes? Could it really have slipped through undetected for all these years? He didn't sleep much that night. The following day, he carried the coin to a trusted numismatist friend who shared his love of the obscure. After several hours of examination, the friend agreed. This dime bore all the hallmarks of a major error. A misplaced or improperly prepared die, perhaps one intended for a proof run or struck on a foreign planchet, had made its way into circulation and produced this anomaly. But the details didn't stop there. When measured precisely, the coin was slightly lighter than the expected 2.27 grams, and the edge appeared marginally thinner, as if it had been struck on a planchet meant for another denomination or composition. This added yet another layer to the mystery. The error, it seemed, arose from a rare but critical lapse at the mint during a period of intense pressure. In 1975, the mint was preparing dies for the upcoming bicentennial designs scheduled for 1976, and workers were known to have been moving back and forth between proof and circulation dies more frequently. In this environment of haste, one erroneous die could easily find its way onto the wrong press, and a few dozen coins might slip through before the mistake was caught, if it was caught at all. Word of Raymond's find spread quietly but steadily among collectors. Initially, dealers were skeptical. Even among error coins, certain claims turned out to be exaggerated or outright hoaxes. But once leading experts examined the dime and verified the telltale signs of a die mix-up and possible off-metal strike, the tide turned. Offers began to trickle in. At first, they were modest, perhaps $10,200, then $12,500 as interest picked up. Raymond held onto the coin, watching the buzz grow, and over the next several years, auction houses began whispering about its unique character. Similar examples remained elusive, and none matched the combination of traits his coin displayed. By the late 1990s, the dime's value had climbed into the thousands, and Raymond could barely believe it. Each time it was exhibited at a show, it drew a crowd. Some speculated that it might fetch $15,000. Others thought $20,000 or more in the right market. Yet just as excitement built to a fever pitch, another twist emerged. A second collector surfaced, claiming to have found a 1975 dime with an entirely different kind of error. A bold double die obverse, showing dramatic doubling on the date and motto. The revelation shocked everyone. Were there multiple distinct error types from 1975? The double die discovery fueled even more fervor in the community, and suddenly collectors began scouring their jars and rolls of 1975 dimes, hoping to uncover one of these elusive mistakes. The value of Raymond's coin began to fluctuate wildly at auction previews. Some thought the newfound double die might overshadow his coin's more subtle die and planchet mix-up, but others argued that his coin's unique story and physical anomalies made it just as, if not more, desirable. At one point, an auction house estimated his dime at $30,000, only for it to hammer $24,024,000 in a dramatic bidding war. Then, a few years later, it sold again $35,000. The market had spoken. The rarity and intrigue of the coin had cemented its place in numismatic lore. Collectors continued to debate the finer points of its characteristics. Under high magnification, its devices revealed tiny yet unmistakable irregularities. The torch's flame was slightly flattened on the right side, suggesting an improperly seated die at the moment of strike. The motto appeared almost ghost-like, as though struck just shy of full pressure. The reeded edge displayed faint, uneven spacing on some sections, hinting at misalignment during the blanking process. To a casual observer, these were minor imperfections, but to a collector's practiced eye, they told the whole story. A story of error, haste, and chance that no mint could ever reproduce deliberately. Then, just when it seemed the tale had fully unfolded, yet another layer was revealed. In 2015, while researching the Philadelphia Mint archives, a numismatic historian unearthed a memo dated late 1974. The memo discussed experimental planchets being tested for potential cost savings. Lighter copper-nickel alloys struck to dime specifications but intended only for internal evaluation. The possibility arose that Raymond's dime had been struck on one of these experimental blanks by accident. If true, this would make his coin not only an error but also a relic of a short-lived internal test program that had never been meant for public release. This revelation sent shockwaves through the collector community. The dime, already rare, now carried a pedigree of historical importance that few had anticipated. Auction estimates soared again, with experts suggesting it could exceed $50,000 in the right setting, depending on documentation. Collectors debated endlessly in forums and at shows. Some claimed it was purely a die error, others argued passionately for the experimental planchet theory. Raymond, for his part, remained quietly thrilled that the coin he had stumbled upon in an ordinary bag of change continued to surprise and delight the numismatic world. The 1975 dime error stood as a testament to the unpredictable dance between precision and imperfection that defines minting. It was an unassuming coin transformed by a momentary lapse, a relic that wove together the haste of bicentennial preparations, the hidden tests of a cost-conscious mint, and the sharp eyes of a collector who simply loved the thrill of the hunt. And somewhere, even now, in jars and drawers across the country, perhaps another waits, unnoticed yet, ready to rewrite the story all over again. The presses in Denver clattered with mechanical precision in 1996, the rhythmic impact of dies striking planchets echoing through the vast minting hall. It was a year like any other at the U.S. Mint, at least on the surface. The Roosevelt Dime, steadfast in design since 1946, continued to roll off the lines in staggering numbers to meet commerce's endless demand. In Denver, millions of dimes were struck daily, their obverse faces bearing Franklin D. Roosevelt's left-facing profile, their reverse showing the familiar torch, oak, and olive branches. The work was routine, the pace relentless, and every coin that tumbled into the bins looked the same as the last. But somewhere among the roaring machinery and bustling mint employees, a quiet anomaly took shape, a small slip of metal and timing that would ripple through numismatic history decades later. The die shop worked tirelessly to keep up with the demand for fresh dies. The high-speed presses wore them down faster than anyone liked to admit, and while quality control was stringent, it was also human. One day in mid-1996, a press operator loaded what he thought were 2 correct dies into a machine, set it in motion, and left it humming while he moved on to another station. As coin after coin was struck, no one immediately noticed that one die had been improperly prepared, creating a subtle but unmistakable flaw in each dime it produced. A few thousand such coins mixed quietly into circulation, indistinguishable to the casual eye but carrying an irregularity that would later turn ordinary change into something extraordinary. In a small town in Missouri, years later, a collector named Hannah Myers sat at her kitchen table, sorting through a newly acquired lot of circulated dimes. Hannah was a meticulous and patient numismatist, never rushing her searches, always savoring the quiet thrill of the hunt. That afternoon, she picked up one of the many 1996 dimes, gave it the usual glance, and moved to set it aside. But something stopped her. It didn't glint quite the same way. She brought it closer to the light, squinting at Roosevelt's face. The inscriptions were clean, yet the lettering of liberty seemed faintly doubled, almost as if it shimmered. Turning it over, she froze. The reverse, too, bore the faintest doubling, but more than that, it felt ever so slightly off-center, the reeded edge oddly compressed along one side. Her heart quickened as she pulled out her loupe and examined it more closely. The motto "I in God we trust" showed what appeared to be distinct doubling, and the flame of the torch on the reverse seemed oddly flattened, as if struck out of alignment. She compared it against several other 1996 dimes, laying them side by side, and saw the truth emerge in sharp relief. This was no simple strike. The subtle doubling and misalignment suggested a die that had rotated or shifted during production. A major mint error, hiding in plain sight all these years. Sleep didn't come easily for Hannah that night. In the morning, she visited a local coin dealer she trusted, a man named Carl who had been in the business for 40 years. Carl examined the dime carefully under magnification, then under even higher magnification, tracing the tiny irregularities in the fields and devices with his fine-pointed tweezers. He muttered quietly as he worked, nodding to himself before finally looking up. "This is a significant error," he said at last, his voice low and full of restrained excitement. "A doubled die obverse, light rotation, possibly even an improperly seated die. These aren't just common mistakes. This combination is rare. Very rare." Word spread quickly among serious collectors. Some suspected it might be the result of a fatigued die that should have been retired earlier. Others argued it was a misalignment compounded by a doubled hub during die creation. Whatever its cause, the error's presence on such a high mintage coin, yet with so few examples surfacing, lent it a sense of mystery and exclusivity. Hannah fielded calls from dealers offering a few $100s at first, then more as the buzz built. It passed through an auction for $12,000, only to climb to $15,000 a few years later as more experts confirmed its status as one of the more dramatic Roosevelt dime errors in decades. Interest in the 1996 error dime surged during the 2010s. Collectors began scrutinizing their change more carefully, hoping to find one of the elusive error strikes. A handful of additional examples trickled into the marketplace, each displaying the same odd doubling and subtle rotation. Auction prices continued to climb, with some hammering for over $20,000, then $30,000, then even beyond. Speculation was fierce, with collectors debating how many might exist. Some insisted no more than 50 were ever made. Others believed the number was closer to 25. Either way, the combination of high demand and tight supply drove the value higher still. Those who examined the coin more closely described its distinct physical traits in almost reverent tones. On the obverse, Liberty showed a ghost-like doubling visible even to the naked eye under strong light. The date, 1996, displayed slight separation in the 1 and 9 when viewed at the right angle. The reverse torch, normally crisp and balanced, looked subtly twisted to the right, and the flame's central line appeared faintly split. Even the edge of the dime, usually uniform and perfect, showed telltale signs of uneven striking pressure, its reeds compressed more tightly on one side than the other. Each of these details added to the coin's narrative, transforming it from a mere curiosity into a full-fledged legend among collectors. The greatest surprise, however, came nearly 2 decades after Hannah's discovery. In 2018, a researcher digging through archival records uncovered internal Denver Mint correspondence from 1996 that referenced a brief and unpublicized stoppage on one of the dime presses due to a broken alignment pin. The press had continued operating for an unspecified period before anyone noticed the defect. No official record existed of how many error coins were struck during that time, only that they had likely entered circulation before the fault was identified. This revelation confirmed what collectors had long suspected. The 1996 dime error wasn't just a random mishap but a tangible artifact of a known production breakdown, an authentic, traceable moment in minting history. For Hannah, the journey of her find had been a whirlwind of curiosity, disbelief, validation, and ultimately vindication. She had watched her modest kitchen table discovery grow into one of the most sought-after modern dime errors in American numismatics. At the most recent auction where a pristine example crossed the block, the room held its breath as the bidding climbed past $40,000, then $50,000, then higher still. As the auctioneer's gavel fell, the final price was announced to stunned applause. That night, word spread across the collecting community. The 1996 Roosevelt dime error now commanded between $44,000 and $114,000 at auction. And somewhere, perhaps in a jar of change, another waited quietly for its story to begin. The Denver Mint floor in 2011 was as unassuming as ever, the long rows of presses churning out millions of coins to meet the relentless demands of commerce. Among them, the Roosevelt dime continued its steady, dependable production, unchanged in design since the mid-20th century, a quiet workhorse of American pocket change. Each obverse bore Franklin D. Roosevelt's enduring profile, paired with the dignified reverse torch flanked by olive and oak branches. Few gave thought to the countless tons of copper-nickel alloy moving through those cavernous halls. But amid the whir of dies and the roar of conveyors, a small imperfection crept into the machinery. As unnoticed as a whisper at first, it left behind its faint but unmistakable signature, one that would later send ripples through the world of numismatics. That summer, one press in particular experienced an issue so subtle it escaped even the sharpest eyes of the mint inspectors. A die, likely fatigued, improperly aligned, or carelessly mounted, created a string of dimes that bore a flaw invisible to all but the most observant. Coins struck that day flowed seamlessly into the bins, mixed with the rest, and were boxed, bagged, and sent out to banks across the nation. Nobody watching that press could have known that a tiny fraction of the dimes it struck that week would one day be worth more than their weight in silver and far more than anyone dared imagine. Years later, in the quiet suburbs of Pennsylvania, a young collector named Brian Torres spent his evenings searching through rolls of coins from local banks. For him, it wasn't about getting rich, it was about the hunt, the joy of finding the unexpected among the mundane. One evening, he cracked open a standard orange-wrapped roll of dimes. They spilled across the table with their usual metallic clatter, gleaming with the dull luster of everyday use. One by one, he sorted them, looking for proofs, odd dates, or high-grade examples. But then his fingers stopped. One 2011 dime caught his attention, though he couldn't immediately say why. He turned it over, holding it to the light. The torch seemed unusual, slightly off-center somehow. He leaned in closer, squinting. The olive branch appeared to drift subtly into the torch's flame, while the oak leaves seemed to show faint doubling. He flipped it back to the obverse. Roosevelt's profile looked oddly distorted, almost as though his nose and mouth had been doubled faintly downward. Brian's pulse quickened. This was no ordinary strike. From that moment on, the coin never left his sight. He spent hours poring over reference books and online forums, comparing his find against known errors. The term double die kept appearing in his research, along with phrases like die rotation and misalignment. The closer he looked, the more evidence he saw that his dime had suffered from not one, but possibly two errors during striking, a double die obverse combined with a slight die rotation. Even to an untrained eye, the difference was noticeable. The word Liberty seemed to shimmer with faintly offset letters, and the date 2011 bore a telltale separation in the numeral ones. Nervously, he took it to a seasoned dealer in Philadelphia, who examined the coin under high magnification. At first, the man said nothing, his brow furrowing as he turned it in his hands. Finally, he set the loop down and looked at Brian. "This is something special," he said quietly, his voice betraying just a hint of excitement. "There are very few modern dimes with errors this clear, especially from 2011. It's a double die with light rotation, and it looks like the reverse die may have been improperly seated." The discovery sparked a wave of interest when word of it reached a few trusted collectors. Other examples trickled out of collections over the next few years, each one showing similar features: Roosevelt's doubled profile, the slightly rotated reverse, and subtle misalignments along the reeds of the edge. Debate over its origins ranged from the plausible, an improperly aligned die, to the more speculative, a misfed planchet or a hubbing mistake during die preparation. Whatever the cause, the error struck a chord with collectors who prized the rarity of such anomalies in a modern coin era known for its precision. As more examples surfaced, the value began to climb steadily. Early offers hovered in the low thousands, but once prominent auction houses began listing them, prices rose sharply. A certified high-grade specimen hammered at over $15,000 in 2017, sending shockwaves through the collecting community. Over the next few years, as demand outstripped supply, prices doubled and tripled. Collectors with examples in their possession quietly watched the market swell, waiting for the right moment to sell, or to hold in hopes of even greater returns. Those who studied the coin closely described its quirks with awe. The obverse showed Liberty and I in God We Trust with a distinct, ghostly doubling that gave the letters an almost three-dimensional effect. Roosevelt's eye and mouth were clearly doubled under magnification. On the reverse, the flame of the torch appeared tilted slightly to one side, while the oak leaves overlapped the flame in an unnatural way. Even the reeded edge showed irregular compression, more pronounced on one side of the coin. Each minute flaw was a testament to its chaotic moment of creation on that Denver press floor. And then, in 2021, a twist emerged that stunned even the most jaded collectors. Archival photographs from the Denver Mint that year revealed a brief period when one of the dime presses was improperly calibrated. Its upper die reportedly replaced mid-shift without recalibration of the lower die. This oversight, though never officially acknowledged, explained not only the misalignment but also the doubling seen on the obverse. The revelation sent a ripple through the numismatic world, validating the coin's story and cementing its place as a true modern rarity rather than a fluke or minor curiosity. Brian's own example remained in his collection all these years, a constant reminder of that quiet evening when a single coin stood out from a sea of ordinary dimes. And as the most recent auction drew to a close, a new record was set, with the gavel falling amid murmured excitement. The 2011 Roosevelt Dime error, rare and remarkable, now commanded between $36,000 and $108,000 at auction. Somewhere out there, another might still be waiting to be found, nestled in a roll, just another dime, until it isn't. The year 2020 arrived quietly at the Philadelphia Mint, though the world beyond its walls was anything but calm. Production inside continued with military precision despite the disruptions swirling outside. Demand for coins remained steady, and the Roosevelt dime, still clad in its familiar copper nickel, rolled off the presses by the millions each day. The dies struck their rhythm, relentless and mechanical, with only the occasional clang of maintenance tools breaking the hum of industry. Yet even in such controlled conditions, even with decades of experience behind the Mint's technicians, imperfection still managed to find a way. Somewhere, during one of those long shifts in early spring, a single press began to falter, its upper die loosening just enough to change everything. No one noticed at first. The press operators recorded no anomalies, and the bins filled with neatly stacked bags of fresh dimes, their edges sharp, their surfaces gleaming. They were wrapped and distributed, joining the endless stream of change destined for pockets and cash registers. They scattered across the country, indistinguishable at a glance from the rest. but they carried something no inspector had caught. A subtle, critical flaw that would later enthrall collectors and fuel quiet bidding wars among those who understood what they were seeing. It wasn't until months later that the first whispers began to surface. A young collector named Alicia Rivera in Nevada spent much of her time during the long spring of 2021 sifting through coin rolls from her local credit union. She didn't expect to find anything unusual in rolls of 2020 dimes. After all, they were barely a year old, with billions minted and no reported varieties of note. Still, she looked at each one carefully. When she turned over a particularly bright dime and saw the odd doubling on Roosevelt's jawline, she paused. Something about it seemed off. She flipped the coin back and forth, examining the torch on the reverse. The flames appeared to stretch unnaturally, with faint echoes of the design bleeding slightly into the branches at either side. Even the lettering seemed unsettled, as though it couldn't quite decide where it belonged. Alicia set it under a loupe and leaned in closer, her heart beginning to race. The date, 2020, was crisp, but there was a faint doubling on the zeros. Liberty shimmered with barely perceptible shadows. This wasn't just wear. This was something else entirely. Alicia sent images to a trusted online community of collectors, hoping someone might tell her what she had. The responses came quickly, a chorus of intrigue and cautious excitement. Several users confirmed her suspicion, a double die, and likely a misaligned die as well. It was an error that, at least to their knowledge, hadn't been documented yet for 2020 dimes. Encouraged, she sent the coin off to a grading service, where it was authenticated as a legitimate mint error, one of the first confirmed examples of its kind. As the months went on, more collectors began to report similar finds, each one carrying the same distinctive flaws. Roosevelt's eye doubled faintly downward, the mouth and jaw appearing ghosted. On the reverse, the torch's flame seemed to lean slightly to the right, overlapping with the olive branch. The oak leaves also appeared doubled in places, and along the coin's edge, some examples even showed uneven reading, compressed slightly more on one side. The errors were subtle but undeniable, and together they painted a picture of a press that had worked itself loose and quietly churned out a handful of flawed dimes before anyone intervened. At first, these coins changed hands for modest sums. A few $100s here, 1,000 there. But as their scarcity became clear, and as the story of their origin began to circulate, demand quickly outpaced supply. Auction houses began to include them in high-profile modern error lots. One particularly well-preserved specimen, graded at MS68, drew gasps when it hammered at nearly $20,000 in late 2022. That sale marked the beginning of a steady climb in value, and those fortunate enough to have found one earlier began to watch the market with growing fascination. Even seasoned numismatists found themselves drawn to the strange beauty of the coin's imperfections. The obverse lettering carried delicate shadows that gave Liberty and I in God We Trust a shimmering, almost ethereal quality under magnification. Roosevelt's ear showed faint doubling, adding depth to his otherwise flat profile. On the reverse, the normally crisp torch flame now danced with ghost-like outlines, its tip leaning slightly into the olive leaves. And in a rare twist, a few examples were found to exhibit a minor die crack extending from the rim into the lower oak branch, a feature that only deepened their intrigue among specialists. In early 2023, a quiet revelation came to light when an anonymous former Mint employee posted on a private forum, claiming to have witnessed the faulty press firsthand during a particularly hectic production run in April 2020. According to the post, a loose collar die went unnoticed for several hours, allowing a misaligned upper die to repeatedly strike planchets at a slight angle. The result was a string of flawed coins, most of which likely vanished into circulation, their significance unknown to those who spent them on coffee or groceries. This small confession, though unverifiable, fit the evidence collectors had already pieced together, and added a touch of human fallibility to the mystery. Alicia never sold her original find. She keeps it in a case, displayed on a shelf in her modest home, a quiet reminder of a strange, improbable discovery made during an even stranger year. But others have parted with theirs at just the right moment, reaping the rewards of an error that began life as an overlooked flaw and evolved into one of the most coveted modern dimes to date. In the latest round of sales, the value has continued to surprise even the most optimistic watchers. The 2020 Roosevelt dime error, once nothing more than a curious flaw, now fetches between $30,000 and $90,000 at auction, depending on condition and grade. And still, there may be more out there, hiding in drawers or jars, waiting for someone with a keen eye and steady hands to notice what everyone else missed.